In a world addicted to noise, reaction, and instant pleasure, the rarest power is not money, status, or fame. It is emotional control, the ability to remain calm when disrespected, the ability to stay disciplined when nobody is watching, the ability to keep moving forward while life quietly destroys your comfort. This is the forgotten power of Stoicism. And tonight, you are not just listening to a story. You are entering the mind of people who mastered pain, silence, discipline, betrayal, loneliness, and pressure without losing themselves. Because the truth is brutal. Most people are not destroyed by enemies. They are destroyed by their own emotions. So listen carefully, because these stories may change the way you see suffering forever. A young man once lived in ancient Greece. He was poor, ignored, physically weak, and mocked by nearly everyone around him. People laughed at his clothes. They laughed at his appearance. They laughed at his dreams. But what hurt him most was not poverty, it was helplessness. Every day he watched powerful men lose control over anger. He watched rich men become slaves to greed. He watched relationships collapse because people could not control their ego. And one night, sitting alone beside a cold stone wall, under the dim firelight of Athens, he asked himself a dangerous question. What if true power is not controlling others, but controlling yourself? That young man would later become one of the first great Stoic thinkers. He realized something humanity still struggles to understand today. External events are temporary, but your response creates your destiny. Years later, another man would embody this philosophy in the most brutal environment imaginable. His name was Epictetus. He was born a slave. Imagine that for a moment. No freedom, no rights, no respect. His body belonged to another human being. One day, his cruel master twisted his leg violently during punishment. Epictetus calmly looked at him and said, "If you continue, you will break it." His master ignored him and twisted harder until the bone snapped. Epictetus looked at the broken leg and quietly replied, "I told you it would break." No screaming, no begging, no hatred. That moment shocked everyone around him. How could a man remain calm in unbearable pain? Because Epictetus understood something terrifyingly powerful. A person can chain your body, but only you can chain your mind. This is Stoicism, not pretending pain does not exist, not acting emotionless, but refusing to let suffering control your soul. Today, modern people panic over comments online. They lose sleep because someone ignored their message. They break mentally because life did not go according to plan. Meanwhile, a slave with a broken leg mastered inner peace thousands of years ago. Think about that carefully. Most suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our interpretation of them. Stoics believe that life has two categories: things you can control and things you cannot. You can control your mindset, your discipline, your actions, your honesty, your effort. You cannot control people's opinions, the past, the future, weather, death, betrayal, loss. The tragedy of modern life is that people sacrifice their peace, trying to control what was never theirs to control. A businessman loses his mind because competitors succeed. A teenager hates himself because strangers online seem happier. A man destroys his health chasing validation from people who secretly do not even respect him. Stoicism teaches a different path. Focus only on your character, because character survives everything. And nobody understood this better than Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor of Rome, the most powerful man on earth at the time. He had armies, wealth, influence, absolute authority. Yet his private writings reveal something heartbreaking. He was exhausted. Rome was collapsing under war, disease, betrayal, corruption, and political pressure. People expected him to be invincible, but inside, he was fighting anxiety, loneliness, and constant stress. Every morning, he reminded himself, "Today I will meet selfish people, arrogant people, dishonest people, jealous people. But he did not write those words with hatred. He wrote them to prepare his mind, because Stoicism teaches preparation over surprise. Most people suffer twice, first in imagination, then in reality. Stoics train themselves to accept difficulty before it arrives. That is why they become mentally dangerous. A Stoic man does not collapse when life becomes difficult because he already expected struggle. He knows people will disappoint him. Life will become unfair. Success will take longer than expected. Pain is guaranteed. But instead of becoming bitter, he becomes stronger. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself late at night after brutal wars. Surrounded by death, pressure, and uncertainty, he repeated one idea again and again. You control your mind, not external events. Imagine how powerful that becomes in modern life. Your relationship ends. You still control your response. Your business fails. You still control your next action. People mock your dreams. You still control your discipline. Stoicism is not weakness. It is emotional warfare against chaos. Now listen carefully to this story, because it may be the most important one. A young soldier once asked an old Stoic teacher, "How do I stop fearing loss?" The old man handed him a glass cup and said, "Look at this carefully." The soldier admired the beautiful craftsmanship. Then the old man said, "One day this cup will break. Accept that now, and you will appreciate it more while it exists." The student became confused. The teacher continued, "Your body will age, your loved ones will die, your possessions will disappear. Nothing was promised forever." This sounds dark to weak minds, but to Stoics, this creates freedom. Because when you accept impermanence, you stop living in constant fear. Modern society teaches attachment. Stoicism teaches appreciation without dependence. Love deeply, but understand nothing belongs to you permanently. That mindset changes everything. You stop becoming desperate. You stop becoming emotionally addicted. You stop panicking when life changes, and suddenly, peace enters your life. One of the most misunderstood parts of Stoicism is silence. Stoics understood that silence is power. Weak people react instantly. Strong people observe first. When insulted, they pause. When angry, they breathe. When emotional, they think before speaking. Because one uncontrolled moment can destroy years of progress. Look at the world today. People destroy friendships with impulsive messages. They ruin careers with emotional decisions. They expose their weakness publicly because they never learned self-control. Stoicism teaches mastery over impulse, and mastery over impulse creates freedom. A man who cannot control anger becomes a prisoner of anger. A man who cannot control desire becomes a prisoner of temptation. A man who cannot control emotion becomes easy to manipulate. This is why Stoics trained discipline daily. Cold weather, hard exercise, simple living, intentional discomfort. Not because suffering is enjoyable, but because comfort weakens the mind when it becomes addiction. The Stoics believed voluntary hardship creates mental armor. If you can remain calm in discomfort, life loses its power to intimidate you. Imagine waking up every day knowing no insult can destroy your confidence. No failure can stop your progress. No betrayal can break your identity. That is Stoic strength. And here is the truth nobody wants to hear. Most people never find peace because they spend their entire lives chasing external validation. More money, more followers, more approval, more attention. But the Stoics warned humanity thousands of years ago. If your happiness depends on external things, your peace will always be fragile. Real peace comes from internal stability, a disciplined mind, a controlled tongue, a calm nervous system, a meaningful purpose. That is why some poor people sleep peacefully, while rich people secretly suffer anxiety every night. Peace is psychological, not material. Near the end of his life, Marcus Aurelius wrote something extraordinary. He said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This was not pessimism, it was awareness. Stoics constantly remembered death because remembering death makes life more valuable. When you understand time is limited, you stop wasting years proving yourself to people who do not care. You stop delaying your goals. You stop living dishonestly. You stop fearing small things. Death clarifies priorities. And strangely, accepting mortality creates courage. Because once you realize life is temporary, fear loses some of its control over you. Now think carefully about your own life. How much energy have you wasted worrying about things outside your control? How many nights lost over opinions? How many emotional reactions damaged your peace? How many opportunities destroyed by fear? Stoicism asks you to reclaim your mind. Not tomorrow. Now. Train yourself to pause before reacting. Train yourself to accept discomfort. Train yourself to separate emotion from action. Train yourself to focus on what you control. Because life will test you repeatedly. People will betray you. Plans will fail. Pain will arrive uninvited. But if your inner world remains stable, chaos outside loses power. And that is the final lesson of Stoicism. You do not become strong by controlling the world. You become strong by controlling yourself. The world may remain chaotic forever, but your mind does not have to. So the next time life attacks your peace, remember the slave with the broken leg. Remember the emperor fighting silent anxiety.
Remember the philosopher sitting alone under the cold sky asking what true power really means. And ask yourself, will I become another emotional prisoner of modern life? Or will I become unshakable? Because in the end, Stoicism is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming free. Writing. Most people think strength is loud. They think powerful people dominate rooms, speak aggressively, show off success, and crush everyone around them. But history quietly reveals a terrifying truth. The strongest people are often the calmest people, the people who survive betrayal without collapsing, the people who lose everything and still rebuild, the people who stay disciplined while others surrender to emotion. This is the hidden psychology of Stoicism. And tonight, you are going to walk through a story about pain, pressure, heartbreak, self-control, and the dangerous power of a calm mind. Because modern life is designed to distract you from yourself. Every day, people are manipulated by fear, comparison, desire, outrage, social media validation, fake success, and emotional chaos. And slowly, they lose control over their own mind. But thousands of years ago, Stoic philosophers discovered something extraordinary. A peaceful mind is nearly impossible to defeat. There was once a young man living in Rome during one of the darkest periods in human history. War surrounded the empire. Disease spread through cities. Families lost everything overnight. Soldiers died far from home. Politicians lied constantly. Fear infected everyone. And yet this young man noticed something strange. The people suffering most emotionally were not always the people suffering most physically. Some poor people remained calm. Some wounded soldiers stayed mentally strong. Some wealthy men secretly collapsed under anxiety. This confused him deeply. One evening he visited an old philosopher known for teaching Stoicism. The teacher lived simply. No luxury, no guards, no massive house. The young man asked him, "How do I become fearless?" The old philosopher smiled quietly and replied, "You do not become fearless. You become stronger than fear." That sentence changed the young man forever. Because Stoicism does not promise a painless life. It teaches resilience. The philosopher invited the young man to walk with him through the crowded streets of Rome. As they walked, people shouted insults at the philosopher. Others mocked his appearance. Some laughed at his simple clothing, but the old man never reacted. Finally, the student asked, "Why do you ignore them?" The philosopher stopped walking and pointed toward a barking dog behind a fence. "Do you argue with every barking dog you hear?" The student laughed. "Of course not." The philosopher nodded slowly. "Then why give strangers power over your peace?" That lesson became one of the foundations of Stoic thinking. Not every opinion deserves your emotional reaction. Modern people hand over their peace too easily. A negative comment ruins their entire day. A rejection destroys their confidence. Someone else's success makes them feel worthless. Stoicism teaches emotional independence. Your worth cannot depend on unstable people. And this lesson becomes even more important when life becomes painful. Years later, the same young man lost almost everything. His business collapsed. His closest friend betrayed him financially. The woman he loved married someone else. Debt followed him everywhere. For months, he suffered silently. One night, he returned to the old philosopher and asked, "Why is life destroying me?" The philosopher looked into his eyes carefully and said, "Maybe life is not destroying you. Maybe life is revealing you." That answer felt cruel at first, but eventually the young man understood. Difficulty exposes character. When pressure arrives, weak discipline collapses, fake confidence disappears, emotional dependence becomes visible. Stoicism teaches that adversity is training, and just like fire strengthens steel, hardship can strengthen the human mind, if approached correctly. This does not mean pain feels good. It means pain can become useful. The Stoics believed every hardship contains hidden training: patience, discipline, humility, endurance, wisdom. Without struggle, many people remain mentally fragile forever, and modern society accidentally increases this fragility. People seek constant comfort, instant gratification, endless entertainment, easy dopamine, but comfort addiction creates weak minds. That is why many people panic the moment life becomes difficult. Stoics intentionally practice discomfort. Some slept on hard floors occasionally. Some fasted voluntarily. Some trained themselves to live with less. Why? Because they wanted proof that survival did not depend on luxury. And once you stop fearing discomfort, your confidence changes completely. Imagine entering difficult situations without panic. Imagine losing money without losing your identity. Imagine being alone without feeling empty. That is psychological freedom. One of the most powerful Stoic lessons involves control. The philosopher once told his student, "If you try controlling everything, life will break you." At first, this sounded hopeless, but then he explained, "You control your actions. You do not control outcomes." This distinction changes everything. You can work hard, but you cannot force success. You can love someone deeply, but you cannot force loyalty. You can speak honestly, but you cannot control how others interpret you. Most anxiety comes from demanding certainty from an uncertain world. Stoicism replaces control with preparation. Prepare your mind instead of trying to control reality. This mindset becomes incredibly powerful during failure. Most people view failure as identity destruction. Stoics view failure as information. If something collapses, learn, adjust, continue. No emotional drama required. Even Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, constantly reminded himself not to become arrogant during success or hopeless during failure, because both emotional extremes distort judgment. Stoics value balance. Calm during victory, calm during defeat. This emotional stability makes a person extremely difficult to manipulate, and manipulation dominates modern society. Advertisements manipulate insecurity, social media manipulates comparison, politics manipulates fear, toxic relationships manipulate emotional weakness, but a disciplined Stoic mind becomes resistant to psychological control, because Stoics ask powerful questions. Is this necessary? Is this true? Does this deserve my energy? Am I reacting emotionally or rationally? Most people never pause long enough to ask these questions. They react automatically, and automatic reactions create predictable lives. The philosopher eventually gave the young man one final lesson before his death. He brought him to a cemetery at sunset. Rows of graves stretched silently across the hill. The philosopher said quietly, "Every person buried here once believed they had more time." The young man felt cold. The philosopher continued, "Remembering death is not meant to scare you. It is meant to wake you up." This became one of the deepest Stoic principles, memento mori. Remember you will die, not to become depressed, but to become intentional. Because when humans forget death, they waste life carelessly. They delay dreams. They tolerate toxic people. They postpone honesty. They spend years chasing meaningless approval. But awareness of mortality creates urgency. Suddenly, time becomes precious. Attention becomes valuable. Peace becomes sacred. The young man eventually rebuilt his life, not because life became easier, but because his mind became stronger. He no longer feared criticism. He no longer depended on validation. He no longer collapsed during setbacks. And strangely, once he stopped chasing external approval, success arrived naturally. Because calm people think clearly, disciplined people act consistently, emotionally controlled people recover faster than everyone else. That is why Stoicism remains powerful even today, not because it removes pain, but because it teaches you how to survive pain without losing yourself. So if life currently feels heavy, remember this: You are not required to control everything. You are only required to control yourself, your thoughts, your reactions, your discipline, your values. That is enough, because eventually the world respects people who remain calm under pressure. And perhaps the greatest Stoic truth of all is this: a peaceful mind creates a powerful life. Not a perfect life, not an easy life, but a powerful one. So when chaos enters your life again, and it will, pause before reacting. Breathe, observe. Remember that emotions are temporary, but decisions create consequences. And ask yourself one final question: will this moment control me, or will I control myself?
In a world where people are addicted to attention, noise, and endless validation, silence has become terrifying. Most people cannot sit alone with their own thoughts for 10 minutes. They need distractions, notifications, entertainment, approval. Because the moment silence enters their life, they are forced to face themselves. And that is exactly why powerful minds protect silence. Tonight's story is not about a king, not about a warrior, not about a billionaire. It is about a man who lost everything and discovered something far more valuable than success: inner control. Many years ago, in a cold mountain village far from the crowded cities of Rome, a young man named Lucian lived with endless ambition. He wanted recognition, power, respect. Every day he dreamed about escaping poverty and becoming someone important. He believed happiness existed somewhere outside himself. So at the age of 19, he left his village and traveled to the great cities of the empire. At first, the world amazed him. Massive buildings touched the sky. Markets overflowed with gold and luxury. Crowds admired powerful men. Wealthy leaders were treated like gods. Lucian became obsessed. He worked endlessly. He manipulated people. He lied when necessary. He sacrificed friendships for opportunities, and slowly he achieved success. By the age of 30, businesses, expensive clothing, servants, and influence. People finally respected him. But something strange, even surrounded by luxury, he could not sleep peacefully. His mind raced constantly. Fear of losing money, fear of betrayal, fear of competitors, fear of becoming irrelevant. The success he once worshipped had quietly turned into slavery. One evening, during an important gathering, a wealthy insulted him in front of hundreds of people. Lucian smiled politely, but inside exploded. For weeks he obsessed. He replayed the humiliation repeatedly in his mind. He stopped enjoying life entirely. And one night, unable to control his frustration, he destroyed furniture inside his own home. After the rage disappeared, silence filled the room, and for the first time in years, he saw him. Despite all his wealth, he had no control over his own mind. That realization terrified him more than poverty ever did. A few days later, an old visited him and quietly said, "There is a man outside the city who teaches people how to themselves." Lucian laughed at first. Philosophers were weak men who failed at real life. But desperation pushed him forward. The next morning, he traveled beyond the city to meet the teacher. The philosopher lived in a small stone beside a lonely forest. Guards, no luxury, no servants. The simplicity Lucian immediately. How can a man live like this willingly, he thought. When the old philosopher opened the door, he noticed something unusual. The man's eyes were calm, not the calmness of comfort, of control, the calmness of... Lucian introduced himself proudly, lit status. The old philosopher listened silently. Then he asked one simple question. "If I insult right now, who controls your mind?" Lucian frowned. "What kind of question is that?" The philosopher repeated himself. "If another person can control your emotions whenever they choose, are you truly powerful?" The question struck him deep because he already knew the answer. Several months, the next Lucian visited the philosopher daily, but the lessons were nothing like he expected. No secret formulas, no magical wisdom. Instead, the philosopher taught brutal truth. You suffer because you are attached. You seek approval from unstable people. You chase control over things never yours. You fear losing temporary things. At first, Lucian resisted these ideas, but slowly he realized the philosopher was right. Their identity depended on external validation. Status, he felt worthless. Without praise, he felt invisible. Without success, he felt empty. He had built his life on fragile foundations.
One cold evening, the philosopher handed a candle. During a storm, the wind blew violently around them. "Protect the flame," he said, and carefully covered it with his hands as they walked through the darkness. After several minutes, the philosopher asked, "What are you protecting so?" "The flame," Lucian replied. The philosopher nodded slowly. "That is how you must protect your mind from the storms of life." Those words changed him forever. For the first time, he understood Stoicism. Life would always contain storms, insults, failure, loss, death, betrayal, but inner peace could still be protected correctly. Over time, Lucian began changing. When insulted, he paused before reacting. When he observed his thoughts instead of obeying them. When life became uncomfortable, he stopped panicking. And strangely, the calmer he became, the stronger he felt. Years later, disaster struck the empire. Economic collapse destroyed the region. Many wealthy men lost everything. Panic spread everywhere. Some men drank themselves into destruction. Others friends for survival. Many collapsed mentally under Lucian remained calm, not because he enjoyed suffering, because he had already trained his mind for uncertainty. A terrified businessman asked him, "How are you staying calm while everything is collapsing?" Lucian looked at him quietly. "I finally learned that peace does not controlling life. It comes from controlling yourself." That sentence spread through the city, and people slowly realized something extraordinary. The strongest man in the room was no longer the richest one. It was the calm. Near the end of his life, and returned to the mountain village where his journey first began. One evening, he sat alone watching the sun, and for the first time in decades, his mind felt completely still. No obsession, no endless ambitions, just no fear of a holy. As darkness slowed, he remembered the philosopher's candle. Storms of life had never stopped. But finally, the flame inside him no longer shook. And perhaps that is the real meaning of Stoicism. Not becoming emotionless, not escaping, but building a mind so disciplined that chaos can no longer control it. Because the world will always remain unpredictable, but your mind does not have to.